Artificial intelligence is changing our world faster than most of us can comprehend. For many, this brings not just excitement, but a deep unease, as if the ground beneath us is shifting and nothing feels stable anymore. Carl Jung reminds us that uncertainty is not new. Humanity has always faced the unknown: wars, plagues, economic upheavals, cultural revolutions. But Jung also believed that within these moments of uncertainty lies the greatest potential for growth. Uncertainty forces us to confront questions we often avoid. Who am I, apart from what I do? Where does my meaning come from? How do I respond when the old patterns no longer hold? In this video, we'll explore how Jung's wisdom can help us face the unknown world of AI with courage, clarity, and a renewed sense of purpose. Because while the future of technology may be unpredictable, the search for meaning is timeless, and it begins within. Everywhere we look, artificial intelligence is reshaping the landscape of our lives. It's writing news articles, generating art, analyzing medical scans, even trading in financial markets. For some, these advances are thrilling. For others, they feel threatening, as if a silent wave is sweeping across the world, and we don't know where it will leave us. One of the deepest sources of this unease is work. For generations, our jobs have not only provided income, but also identity. We say, I am a teacher, I am a nurse, I am an engineer. Work tells us who we are, how we belong, and where we fit in the social fabric. But what happens when a machine can do our work more quickly, more cheaply, and often more accurately? What happens to our sense of self when the roles we've built our lives around begin to dissolve? This is where the uncertainty becomes more than just economic, it becomes existential. Because when people say, I'm afraid AI will take my job, what they often mean is, I'm afraid of losing myself. I'm afraid of becoming invisible, irrelevant, or unnecessary. Jung understood this tension. He saw that human beings crave a sense of stability, of predictability, of being grounded in something larger than themselves. And when that ground is shaken, by war, by illness, by cultural change, or now, by artificial intelligence, the psyche responds with anxiety, confusion, even despair. It is no surprise that stress levels are rising in industries threatened by automation. Anxiety shows up as sleepless nights, as irritability, as that constant background hum of worry you can't quite shake. You may notice yourself scrolling endlessly through news headlines, searching for reassurance, but finding only more uncertainty. And beneath the anxiety, there is often grief for a world that seems to be slipping away, grief for identities tied to roles that no longer feel secure, grief for the imagined futures we once thought were certain. But here is the paradox. Uncertainty, as painful as it feels, is also the very condition that makes transformation possible. Without uncertainty, nothing new can emerge. If everything were fixed and predictable, growth would be impossible. The psyche needs disruption, as much as it longs for stability. So the question is not whether AI will create uncertainty, it already has. The question is, what will we do with this uncertainty? Will it paralyze us, or will it invite us to a deeper journey within ourselves? Take a moment and reflect. When the future feels unstable, where do you normally look for safety? Do you retreat into old habits? Do you cling to routines that no longer serve you? Or do you pause and ask yourself what this uncertainty might be teaching you about who you are and who you could become? Jung often said that much of human suffering comes from our attempts to cling to certainty. We want life to follow a script: go to school, build a career, start a family, retire with security. But life rarely moves according to plan. Accidents happen, illness arrives, cultures shift, and now, technology evolves faster than we can adapt. For Jung, this was not a sign of failure, but of reality itself. Life is, by nature, unpredictable. And the psyche suffers not because uncertainty exists, but because we try to resist it. The more we demand control, the more we tighten our grip, the more fragile we become when change inevitably comes. In myth and story, Jung saw a pattern. The hero must always leave the safety of the familiar world and step into the unknown. This descent into chaos is frightening, but it is also necessary. Without it, the hero cannot grow, cannot discover hidden strengths, cannot become who they were meant to be. Uncertainty, then, is not an accident. It is the very terrain of transformation. When the future feels unstable, when old maps no longer guide us, we are being invited into our own hero's journey. But why does uncertainty feel so threatening? Jung would point to the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we would rather not see: our fears of failure, our insecurities, our aggression, our despair. Most of the time, we push these feelings down. We distract ourselves, we bury them in work, we keep them hidden even from ourselves. Yet in moments of uncertainty, the shadow rises. Suddenly, our buried fears take shape. I'll never adapt. I'll be left behind. I don't matter anymore. And because these fears feel too overwhelming to face directly, we project them outward. AI becomes the villain, the monster, the machine that steals our humanity. But what we're really confronting is our own repressed dread of powerlessness. This is why Jung said that the greatest threat is not what happens out there, but how we respond in here, in the psyche. If we remain unconscious, we mistake our own fears for external enemies. If we become conscious, we begin to see uncertainty not as an enemy, but as a mirror. So the task is not to eliminate uncertainty. That's impossible. The task is to shift our relationship to it. To ask, what is this unknown future demanding of me? What parts of myself must awaken to meet it? Because when we resist uncertainty, we shrink. But when we turn toward it, when we face the shadow it stirs, we step onto the path of individuation. We begin to grow into the fullness of who we are. Jung believed that the deepest hunger of the human soul is not for certainty, but for meaning. He wrote, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Think about that for a moment. Certainty can vanish in an instant. A job can be automated. An industry can collapse. A relationship can end. But meaning endures, even when circumstances change. It is not dependent on what happens outside us. It is something we cultivate within. Why is meaning so powerful? Because it roots us in something larger than ourselves. Certainty tries to control the future. Meaning anchors us in the present. Certainty says, I know what tomorrow holds. Meaning says, even if I don't know what tomorrow holds, my life today matters. We can see this in people who have endured great upheavals. Refugees forced to leave everything behind. Survivors of illness who lost careers, but found new vocations. Entire communities who faced industrial decline, yet discovered renewed purpose in rebuilding together. What allowed them to survive was not certainty, it was meaning. And in our age of artificial intelligence, the same principle applies. The more we try to cling to certainty, to predict exactly which jobs will remain safe, or exactly how society will look in 10 years, the more anxious we become. But when we shift the question from, what will happen, to, what meaning can I create, no matter what happens? Suddenly, the ground feels less shaky. Meaning transforms uncertainty into opportunity. A collapsed career can become the doorway to a more authentic path. A disrupted industry can push us toward skills that reflect our deeper passions. Even the fear of irrelevance can become an invitation to discover our worth beyond productivity. Jung taught that meaning is discovered through dialogue with the unconscious, through dreams, symbols, imagination, and the subtle whispers of the psyche. Meaning is not handed down by society or guaranteed by a job title. It arises when we pay attention to the soul's voice within us. So instead of asking, how do I make the future certain? Jung would urge us to ask, how do I make my life meaningful? Because when life has meaning, uncertainty loses its power to destroy us. We can bend without breaking. We can suffer without being crushed. We can face the unknown, not with despair, but with purpose. Now the question becomes practical. How do we actually find meaning in the middle of disruption? How do we respond when AI begins to reshape the way we live and work? The first step is clarity. We must separate what is within our control from what is not. You cannot control the pace of automation, the direction of global markets, or the decisions of large corporations. But you can control how you respond. You can control whether you collapse into fear, or whether you take this moment as an invitation to grow. The second step is shadow integration. Instead of projecting your fears onto AI, seeing it only as a threat, a monster, or a thief, pause and ask, what is this technology mirroring in me? If AI makes you feel powerless, maybe it is reflecting a fear of inadequacy you already carried. If it stirs anger, maybe it is awakening old wounds of being overlooked or undervalued. By facing these shadows, instead of blaming machines for them, you begin to reclaim your power. The third step is individuation, Jung's term for the process of becoming your whole, authentic self. Individuation asks us to look beneath the surface of our social roles. Many of us have mistaken our work persona, the teacher, the lawyer, the technician, the creator, for our true identity. But if AI strips away those outer roles, what remains? Jung would say, what remains is the self, the deeper center of your being that is not defined by any single role, but by the fullness of who you are. This is why uncertainty, as terrifying as it feels, is also liberating. It dissolves the false security of old identities and forces us to ask, who am I, really? So let me ask you, if your job title vanished tomorrow, what would remain of you? Would you still have a sense of worth, of meaning, of direction? Or would you feel hollow, as though the ground had disappeared beneath your feet? This is the spiritual task of our time, not simply to adapt to technology, but to discover ourselves anew in its shadow. AI may change what we do, but it cannot change who we are, unless we surrender that discovery to it. Let's take these ideas out of theory and bring them into daily life. Jung believed that transformation doesn't happen just by thinking differently. It happens by practicing awareness, day by day. Here are 3 simple but powerful exercises you can begin using right now. Exercise 1. Morning meaning journal. Each morning, before diving into your phone or your to-do list, take 5 minutes with a notebook. Write down 2 things. First, what feels uncertain today? And second, what meaning can I find in it? You might write, I'm worried about losing my job, but maybe this is my chance to explore what I truly love. Over time, this practice shifts your attention from fear of the unknown to discovery of meaning within it. Exercise 2. Shadow dialogue. When you feel anxious about AI or the future, instead of running from that fear, give it a voice. Write a letter from your fear. Let it say everything at once. I'm afraid of being useless. I'm afraid no one will need me. Then, reply to that letter as your wiser self, offering understanding and reassurance. This dialogue helps you integrate the shadow, instead of letting it control you unconsciously. Exercise 3. Guided visualization. Close your eyes and imagine the future, not as a threat, but as a figure, a guide waiting to meet you. What does it look like? How does it speak to you? What gift or lesson does it bring? Jung believed that the unconscious often communicates in images, and by visualizing the future as a companion rather than an enemy, you begin to change your relationship with it. These exercises may sound simple, but their impact is profound, because each one trains your psyche to stop grasping for certainty and start opening to meaning. Each one transforms the unknown from something to fear into something to learn from. So I encourage you, don't just listen. Try one of these practices this week. Even a few minutes a day can begin to shift how you experience uncertainty. Uncertainty has always been part of the human journey. What makes our time unique is that technology has accelerated change to a speed we can barely keep up with. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of that. But Jung reminds us, uncertainty is not the enemy. It is the invitation. AI may reshape the way we work, create, and even relate to one another. But what it cannot take away is our ability to find meaning. Certainty comes and goes, but meaning endures. It grounds us when everything else is shifting. It gives us courage when fear arises. And it transforms disruption into the very soil of growth. So the next time you feel unsettled by the rapid rise of AI, pause and ask yourself, what meaning can I create in this moment? What lesson is uncertainty offering me? What part of myself is being called to awaken? Because AI may change what we do, but only you can decide who you are becoming in response to it. I'd love to hear from you. How are you finding meaning in these uncertain times? Share your reflections in the comments. And if this video gave you something to think about, be sure to like and subscribe, so you won't miss the next deep dive into Jung's wisdom for our changing world. Remember, the future may be uncertain, but meaning is always within reach.